into the topical outline of the course. As I said before, it's in four pieces. The first is the global before local, the introduction and overview. And we're going to, the first thing we're going to do is establish our rules and our procedures for developing our community of practice. Maybe we'll call this a community of scholars. So that's going to be one of the first things that we'll do early in the class is have discussions about how we're going to do things and how we'll handle things. Secondly, I want to immerse you a little bit into the philosophy of views of learning, philosophic views of learning. I want you to know why you teach as you do, and I've done a little bit of informal research over the years among teachers and also other kinds of medical practitioners, and it's often difficult for practitioners to tell you why they do what they do. And so I want to have a little bit of a discussion in that and immerse you into that philosophy. Then the next part of the introduction is going to be parsing out psychological, sociological, and psychosocial views of learning. They're each slightly different views of different camps on learning, and they have a kind of an interesting history. And one has kind of emerged from the other in many ways. Pardon me. So we'll spend some time talking about that, and then we're going to move into a section on what we mean when we talk about reflective judgment. One of the things that we want to talk about is how do you use evidence to solve a problem, and I want you to focus in on what is the quality of the evidence that you're using. So we'll be looking at King and Kitchener's work on reflective judgment, and I think you'll find that pretty interesting. And then we're going to look at establishing some preliminary views on critical thinking. We're going to explore learning transfer and the importance of reflection and being systematic in our reflective activities. And then right at the end of the introductory, we're going to take a quick overview of a model of contextual teaching. And then later in the last section, we're really going to tear into that one and really get into it. But I wanted to give you kind of an overview of that model early. So the second module gets into context and what they mean. So we're going to need to kind of come to a negotiated understanding of the definition of context, because there's a lot of them out there. And context is more than just the physical environment like we're having today, of course, with all this wind. But it's more than that. It's the social relationships. It is things like physical environment, but it's also view on the world, and so there's some really interesting competing theories on what context means. So we'll spend a fair amount of time talking about that. And then the next phase of that is going to be, we're going to talk about the experience and learning, how important experience is to learning. And you've come across that in other courses, I'm sure, where you've talked about John Dewey's view of experience and maybe David Kalb's view of experience learning for adult learners. So, and the last part of that is we're going to kind of blend some of those ideas of context, experience, and learning and transfer all into kind of a negotiated understanding of the issues of context. Then we're going to launch, the next major module is going to launch into social learning theories. And we're going to take a little bit of a historical perspective on social learning theories. As I said a little bit earlier, it goes quite a ways back. It's not just the recent work of Lave that started somewhere in the late 80s and early 90s. But there was a lot of work before that preceded that, and we'll talk about some of those issues here.
Take a drink.
All right. I'm told to take a drink by my producer here. It's about 6 o'clock, so I might have to put some gin in it here in just a minute.
Stop.
So, Then we're going to talk about theories of constructivism as they apply to situated learning. So what does it mean to be a constructivist? There's a lot of ways to be constructivist, and some of them are not appropriate for situated learning, but dialectical constructivist is a perfect fit. So we'll talk about that. And then we are going to dig into more recent situated learning theories. We will be talking about Lave and Etienne Winger's work on communities of practice and theories. Our last let's call it a unit, is on teaching for social constructs and social context and for clinical reasoning. And so we'll be talking about promoting higher order cognition and critical thinking. We'll be looking at some of the adult ed literature on critical thinking and the relationship to systematic reflection. What is the relationship between critical thinking and reflection? We are also, while we're in the area of teaching, then we're going to look at some of the work on cognitive apprenticeship tools. You've probably done some reading about that, but we'll be examining some of the information with regards to content and methods and the sociology of the learning place and sequence. So we'll be thinking about those cognitive apprenticeship tools as tools for promoting teaching in social context. Then we're going to take on the topic of learning transfer, which is really a really important construct here, because we expect students to be able to transfer information that they learn and use it in another setting, or even close. And there's all kinds of ways to think about transfer, but one of the overarching ideas is it's not as reliable as we think and hope that it is. So we're going to talk about that, and then we're going to talk about how real is real. We're going to talk about the importance of context that are authentic and real to the learner, and the power of that. And then we're going to dig into the model of contextual learning and teaching that I've created. And then we'll take apart that. It's a 4-part model, and I'll be giving you extensive readings on that. It's published in a recent book, and I'll give you a copy of that. And then we're going to talk about how to assess learning in contextual learning. So we'll be talking about some ways that you could use authentic assessment as a way to assess student progress. So, just to give you a little bit better overview of the course, there is no particular text, but there will be extensive readings and other materials that I will provide to you on eLearning Commons. Of course, the materials that are provided is not a comprehensive collection, and it's going to be up to you to help us find additional material